Secret identities are a very important element for a lot of superheroes. They allow the hero to have a private life, they protect their loved ones from being targeted, and prevent the hero from being arrested for being a vigilante. Amazing Spider-Man number 258 is an important issue in the character's history. It is the issue where Mary Jane admits that she knows that Spider-Man's secret identity is Peter Parker. It's the issue where the black symbiote suit causes Peter to have his iconic nightmare. And it's the issue where Spider-Man takes his black suit to the Fantastic Four for analysis and discovers that it is a living alien symbiote. More important for the purposes of this list, it's also the comic that features one of the most beloved Spider-Man looks. Once Peter discovers the black suit's true origin, he tries to take it off, but it refuses to be removed, and Mr. Fantastic is forced to use a sonic weapon to get it off of Spidey. This leaves Peter with no way to conceal his secret identity. Johnny Storm is happy to help him out, lending him an old Fantastic Four costume and a paper bag with holes punched into it for a mask. Spidey heads home embarrassed at his appearance, but is forced to stop a robbery in his temporary costume. Both the victims, the criminals, and the police are confused at this strange figure with a "kick me" sign taped to his back, and once the crime scene is secured, the Bagman is swarmed by reporters who ask him who he is and if he is dressed like he is as some kind of superhero initiation prank. All in all, one of the more embarrassing ways that Peter has had to hide his secret identity. Number 9. Batman spreads misinformation. After Bruce Wayne returned from being trapped in time, don't ask, he decided that his efforts to fight crime had been too small in scale. So, he decided to take his crime-fighting enterprise to a global level. As Bruce Wayne, he announced publicly that he had been funding Batman's exploits for years and was starting and funding an organization that was going to franchise the idea of Batman so that every country would get its own Batman. He called it Batman Incorporated. Bruce coming out and admitting that he is linked to Batman, of course, led to more people theorizing that the eccentric billionaire might actually be the Dark Knight. Batman, of course, anticipated this and began posting anonymously on internet message boards. In response to a post saying that Bruce Wayne is obviously Batman, Batman posted, "Wrong, wrong, wrong. Bruce Wayne is dead, and this man on TV has completely different body language and posture. Batman has taken control of Bruce Wayne's life and fortune." When questioned about this method, Bruce responds, "Attempts will shortly be made to expose the secret identities of Batman and his allies. When they happen, they'll be lost in a blizzard of rumor, denial, and misinformation. Just one more crackpot conspiracy theory among 1,000 others." So, Batman apparently founded both Batman Incorporated and QAnon in one day. Number 8. Superman's glasses. The granddaddy of them all. The most infamously bad way to hide a secret identity. Clark Kent being able to throw off suspicion of him being Superman by simply wearing a pair of glasses. Of course, it's not just that. He's also changing his entire personality and demeanor to avoid suspicion, and most people don't consider that Superman would even have a secret identity and they aren't looking. Of course, this is still kinda silly, and this issue is addressed in Superman number 330. In this comic, Clark has a nightmare where all of his friends reveal that they know he's Superman and have just been humoring him. He wakes up and considers if maybe his disguise is kind of weak. He looks at himself in the mirror and thinks to himself, "Now that I stop to think about it, that's the dumbest disguise I've ever seen. What, am I supposed to look like a totally different person? I just look like Superman wearing glasses. I mean, what else should I expect? Ordinary people start wearing glasses. Do their friends say, 'Who are you?' No, they say, 'Oh, you got glasses.'" He wonders how his identity has managed to stay a secret until Lana Lang walks in on him changing and asks him why he's wearing glasses. He responds that he's disguising himself as Clark Kent, and Lana says that that is a terrible disguise as he looks nothing like Clark. This confuses him even more until he realizes that he is really using his super hypnosis power. You see, back in the day, Superman had the ability to hypnotize people with his mind, and his glasses, whose lens were made from the window of the starship he came to Earth in, amplified this ability, hypnotizing everyone into seeing Clark as a different person than Superman. This explanation isn't canon anymore, so he really is just fooling everyone with a pair of glasses, which is of course ridiculous. Number 7. Wolverine becomes Patch. When Wolverine and the X-Men were assumed dead following the Fall of the Mutants storyline, they wanted to keep it that way. So, when Wolverine was called to Madripoor to settle his debt to to a dying man, he knew that he needed a clever disguise so no one would know it was him. His solution was to wear an eye patch and call himself Patch. Not exactly the most involved disguise. At least when Superman wears his glasses, he's putting on a different persona and changing his hairstyle and posture. But Wolverine doesn't even change his hair away from his classic look. He doesn't act any different from his usual self, he's just Wolverine in an eye patch. He developed this persona in 1988's Wolverine Volume 2 Issue 2, but has dusted it off from time to time, using it as one of his go-to disguises when he needs to keep a low profile. Of course, Wolverine typically wears a mask on his X-Men adventures, so the general public probably isn't overly familiar with his face, but it's still not a very clever disguise. Number 6. The Flash is always late. Barry Allen is of course one of the fastest men alive, being able to reach insane speeds so fast that he can travel back in time. He is a masked hero, so it's a bit easier for him to hide his identity, but in order to prevent people from being suspicious, he has developed a foolproof method of throwing people off of his scent. He never shows up on time for anything. The logic being that if he has super speed, surely he would be able to get to appointments on time. Of course, constantly showing up late for everything is more suspicious than if you just did it occasionally, and a better way to stop people from suspecting him would be to stop wearing a prominent ring with a lightning bolt on it on your finger, which makes people assume that Barry has some kind of link, possibly even an engagement, to the Flash. Number 5. Trench coats. You know, in Marvel movies, whenever anyone has to go undercover, they do so by wearing like a baseball cap and sunglasses? Well, the classic comics equivalent of this was the classic combo of a trench coat and a fedora, despite just making the person look like themselves in a trench coat. It remained a staple of comic books for years, with some notable examples being The Thing from the Fantastic Four, as well as it being the go-to disguise for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They still just look like giant turtles in trench coats. While we're on the subject, what is the point of the turtles wearing masks? Are there other giant mutant turtles that they might be confused for? Back on the subject of trench coat disguises, my favorite rendition of this trope is from Marvel's Godzilla King of the Monsters number 19, where Godzilla has been shrunk down and is running through the city. He needs a disguise, so he is put in a trench coat and hat, and it works until some thugs try to mug him and he throws off the disguise and attacks. Number 4. Daredevil's twin. When it comes to superheroes trying to protect their identities, few characters have had such a hard time of it as Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil. You'd think that being blind would throw people off the scent, and yet his identity has been leaked so many times it's almost a running joke that everyone knows who he is. One of Matt's earliest and strangest attempts to hide his life as Daredevil came in Daredevil issue 25, when Matt's friends, Foggy and Karen, found a letter from Spider-Man doxing Matt. They confronted him about the letter, and he was forced to think on his feet. He basically told them, no, I'm not Daredevil. That's my identical twin brother, who I've never mentioned before, Mike Murdock. Foggy and Karen of course do not believe this, as he has never mentioned Mike before, and they ask if they can meet him. Matt says sure, and later shows up in flashy clothes and a beatnik attitude, claiming to be Matt's twin, who is Daredevil and can totally see, despite the fact that he is always wearing sunglasses. Somehow this works, and Karen and Foggy never wonder why the two are never in the same room together. Matt continues this Mrs. Doubtfire style charade for the next 16 issues, before eventually faking Mike's death because he had accidentally created a love triangle with his fake twin and Karen. Number 3. Superman gets caught on TV. In Action Comics number 345, Metropolis is being taken by storm by a new candid camera prank show. While picking their next target, they decide to prank the mild-mannered reporter for the Daily Planet, Clark Kent. Their prank is simple. While Clark is at the fair, they will pull a fake robbery. When Clark goes into a nearby phone booth to call the story in, he'll discover that the phone line is dead, and he won't get his story. Hilarious! The prank is set up, and upon seeing the robbery, Clark goes into the phone booth. The TV host and his camera crew throw open the door to tell him he's been punked, and are shocked to see Clark midway into changing into his Superman costume. They confront him, being like, "Clark, you're Superman," to which he replies, "Am I?" He then takes off his pants on live television, revealing that he is wearing Batman's pants, saying, "I could be Superman, or Batman, or plain Clark Kent. Take your choice." The prank show host realizes that he's being pranked, and Clark explains that he saw the broadcast on a pocket television and bought the costumes at a nearby shop to set up his prank. But what really happened was Superman heard the camera crew coming while he was changing, and rather than just closing his shirt, he drilled a hole through the floor, flew to Jimmy Olsen's place, took his pocket TV and the pants from his Batman costume, flew back to the phone booth, fixed the floor, and then let the camera crew catch him. Number 2. Rainbow Batman. In the classic Batman story featured in Detective Comics number 241, Dick Grayson witnesses a robbery and sees that the getaway car is about to hit a little girl. He pushes her out of the way, but hurts his arm in the process. His heroics make the news, and the whole of Gotham hears about his story. It comes to light that the criminals are planning another robbery, and because Dick witnessed the robbery, Batman needs him to come along as Robin to identify the crooks. The problem is that it is now a matter of public record that Dick Grayson has an injured arm. So, if people see Robin with a hurt arm, they might make the connection and discover their secret identities. Batman decides that in order to protect their identities, he will wear a different colored costume every day until they catch the criminals. His logic being that people will be so weirded out that they'll be staring at him and ignoring Robin. He goes through red, blue, yellow, orange, green, and even a white batsuit with a target on it before eventually taking out the criminals in a rainbow batsuit. The plan works and no one notices Robin's arm, but poor Alfred must have been exhausted making all those multicolored batsuits every night. Number 1. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's Superman, dressed as a bird. In the story The Private Life of Clark Kent, featured in Superman Family number 197, Clark gets home after a long day, only to discover that his neighbors have left him a mynah bird to take care of while they're away for the weekend. The bird keeps bothering Clark, saying quotes from classic movies that it picked up, and is now mimicking. The noise keeps him up for most of the night until he finally tunes her out and gets some sleep. The next day he wakes up and realizes that he was talking in his sleep because the bird keeps saying, "Clark Kent is Superman." He tries to fix the issue by making a looped tape that says, "Clark Kent is a super newsman," and leaving the bird alone, hoping that the bird will pick up the new phrase. Clark gets home and is met with, "Clark Kent is Superman." He takes the bird to the Fortress of Solitude and waits for it to say his secret. And then, every time it does, he screams and leaps out in a giant bird costume to scare the mynah. He does this for an entire night until the bird is so traumatized that it refuses to tell the world that Clark Kent is Superman. Clark gets a call from his neighbors a couple days later asking why the bird doesn't say the phrase they spent weeks training her to say as a prank anymore. Clark realizes his mistake, and the comic ends with him trying to retrain a traumatized bird to say that Clark Kent is Superman again.
Starting us off in at number 10, Superman. Over the years, Superman's identity has been revealed, almost revealed, shared amongst allies, discovered by enemies, you name it. For a dude whose identity is masked solely by a pair of spectacles, the fact that he has remained anonymous to most is actually kind of impressive. Now, in 1986, in Superman issue 423, we got to see Clark Kent's secret identity exposed during a live television broadcast in a story penned by Alan Moore. Now, this would eventually be tossed out from continuity when Man of Steel would be rebooted, and the title of Superman's comics would be altered after this issue to Adventures of Superman, although still kept the issue count. Now, of course, Brian Michael Bendis is planning on having Superman reveal his identity as Clark Kent to the world again in the most recent run of his comics. Because in case you didn't know, Bendis is attempting to ruin everything iconic about Superman. Remember when he decided to rewrite what happened to Krypton and Superman's father? Yeah, that was dumb and disappointing. So don't expect much from this upcoming story. But according to him, he's just bringing Superman closer to being, I quote, the best version of himself. Ugh. Up next, number 9, The Great Machine. Our next number comes from Brian K. Vaughan's Ex Machina, a series under DC's Wildstorm imprint. Now, the story follows the life of a vigilante named The Great Machine, a fellow whose identity is Mitchell Hundred, who, in this universe, is the one and only superhero in existence. Now, the narrative jumps between flashbacks of The Great Machine's days as a superhero and present-day events when Mitchell is the mayor of New York. One of those flashback moments occurs in the 38th issue of the series, where we finally see how Mitchell's identity is revealed to the public and made public knowledge. Mitchell chooses to unmask himself when he announces that he is running for mayor of New York. Mitchell has chosen to reveal himself this way as a means of winning over more voters. If he's willing to sacrifice his life on a daily basis for the well-being of New York City citizens, imagine how devoted he'll be as mayor of that city. Yeah, it's actually a pretty smart platform to run with. In at number 8, Green Lantern John Stewart. In 1985, in Green Lantern Volume 2, Issue 188, John Stewart revealed his identity. At the time, he was the only operating Green Lantern on Earth, with Hal Jordan having just retired from the Corps. John reveals his identity during an interview on a news channel with reporter Tawny Young. Generally, it wasn't too much of a blow to his reputation, minus getting fired from his day job, which kinda sucked. But from then on out, John Stewart's identity remained out as public knowledge, and in the following year, after waking up from the coma he was in, fellow Green Lantern Guy Gardner would also adopt the open identity and lack of a mask as well. In at number 7, Batman. Okay, so this one might be my favorite on this list. Similar to Superman, Superman, there has been numerous instances where Batman's identity has been revealed to another character or has almost been revealed to the public. But perhaps one of the best identity reveals for the Dark Knight comes at the hands of his pal, the Man of Steel himself, Superman. In this case though, we're looking at the Injustice universe, where the world's finest aren't really pals. This happens in the Injustice comics, and Superman uses a very 21st century method to get the news out there. He posted about Batman's identity on Twitter. His tweet was short and sweet: Batman is Bruce Wayne. Now for context, this occurs in the earlier days of their feud in that universe, and the tweet occurred after Superman attempted to reveal Bruce's identity on a live broadcast, which failed because Bruce shut it down before he could. Personally, I love some of the online reactions to these panels, particularly how fans questioned why Superman wasn't verified on Twitter, and how he managed to get that profile picture of him flying towards a camera. I mean, reasonable questions to ask, really. In at 6, Ozymandias. Ozymandias, aka Adrian Veidt from Watchmen, is a character whose identity was already exposed by the time we encounter him in the panels. But in terms of the overall story world of Watchmen, that reveal is one that continues to make an impact to this day. Now for the sake of this number, we are solely looking at Watchmen and none of the new Doomsday Clock narratives. So, when the Keene Act was passed in the series, Ozymandias, the smartest man alive, took advantage of the situation and decided to publicly reveal his identity. In doing so, he used it as a marketing tool to further his ventures in the business world, building himself a multi-billion-dollar empire. Transparency has always been his shtick, so when it came to the reveal that he was ultimately behind the genocide scheme, his plan was so well orchestrated that there was no way anyone aside from his fellow peers, and us readers, would know the truth. That being said, Watchmen ends on a wee bit of a cliffhanger, with Rorschach having mailed his journal to a newspaper that reveals the truth prior to his confrontation with Veidt and his own death. Now speaking of Watchmen character reveals, that brings us to our next number. In at 5, Rorschach. Alright, so here we have a number that was more of a reveal to readers rather than a reveal in the story, although technically it was one of those two. To be fair, Rorschach's identity is actually foreshadowed right from the very beginning of Watchmen, during Rorschach's first monologue. You can see his civilian identity, Walter Kovac, walking on the street below carrying his sign, "The End is Nigh." A flash of red hair very visible in the panel. Walter's appearance on the streets of NYC continued throughout the series, always with him holding his sign. Then when Rorschach is captured by the police after he's been set up by Ozymandias, we learn that the Sign Man and Rorschach are one and the same when he is demasked, and what he believes to be his true face, his mask, is ripped off of him. And when he's in prison, Rorschach's identity is revealed to all of the criminals he helped lock up. Yet when they riot and try to take him out, he outsmarts them yet again and maims them, and then is retrieved by Night Owl and Silk Spectre. Not rescued, just retrieved. He doesn't need rescuing. In at number 4, Batman and Superman. Okay, so this reveal is literally a 2-for-1. We are talking about that time that Batman and Superman in the Silver Age accidentally revealed their identities to one another, and it just made them closer friends. So back in 1952, Batman and Superman met and worked together for the very first time in Superman issue 76, long before they tag teamed on the regular in World's Finest. Now in this story, the two of them shared a cabin while on a cruise ship, as Bruce Wayne and Clark Kent. When trouble is stirred up on board, they both react by saying they're tired and turn off the lights in their cabin. Then while in the dark, they each quietly changed into their superhero costumes. But then, light pours through the porthole in their cabin, revealing the truth to one another. Pretty ridiculous, but also incredibly wonderful at the same time. Later versions of the story would be redone in more realistic ways, like in the animated 1997 Batman Superman World's Finest film. Up next at 3, Tara. DC's Tara has a different kind of reveal. She went from being a member of the Teen Titans to the shocking reveal that she was actually a villain, working for Deathstroke, and a completely different person than what we had seen her portrayed as being before. And also her and Deathstroke might have a weird, inappropriate sexual relationship. Tara is the pivotal character in the Judas Contract, which is one of the most iconic Teen Titans storylines to date. She would join up with the Titans, flirt with Beast Boy, and then all of a sudden this 15-year-old superhero reveals herself to have been infiltrating the team, motivated out of her hate and anger towards the world. One of her creators also called her a slut, so almost caused the downfall of the team too. The revelation of her true identity and motives occurred in volume 2 of the New Teen Titans issue 34, and she would be later defeated for good, aka killed off, in the Tales of the Teen Titans Annual 3, 1984. Up next at 2, Spider-Man. Spider-Man is a character who's had reveals in both the comics and the MCU, and in both cases, the reveal has made major waves in their respective universes. Now let's start off with the MCU reveal, since that's the one that we haven't seen the full reaction to yet. So, in Spider-Man Far From Home, in the first post-credits scene, J. Jonah Jameson makes an appearance in which it's revealed that that, despite Peter defeating Mysterio, the villain had the last laugh, framing Peter as a homicidal criminal. He reveals his identity as well, which Jameson then exposed to the public, much to Peter's shock. Now, in the comics, Peter has had to juggle a few different reveals in the past. Back in 1966's The Amazing Spider-Man issue 39, the Green Goblin found out Peter's identity after he found a way to neutralize his Spidey sense. He trailed Peter home to discover him returning to Aunt May's house, and he then attacked him on the spot. But perhaps the more important reveal came much later, during the second issue of the Civil War story event. Peter's identity was publicly revealed, and it would eventually lead to a series of terrible events, including Aunt May being attacked and almost dying, with Peter having to strike a deal with Mephisto to save her, which in the process undid his marriage to Mary Jane Watson and rebooted him in Brand New Day, where his identity became a secret once more. And last but not least, in at number 1, Iron Man. This one is a double whammy yet again. We are talking Tony Stark in both the comics and the MCU for this number, since both were pretty darn monumental. And really, there's been multiple occasions in the comics where Tony Stark has revealed his identity to the public, but he's also taken it back a bunch of times. In 1998's Iron Man Captain America Annual, Tony used a device that made the world forget that he was a superhero persona. He once revealed his identity to the public in the middle of a press conference to save a dog. He revealed it again in Iron Man Volume 3, Issue 55 in 2002. It also happened in the first Civil War story event, which occurred between 2006 and 2007. Now that one was entirely intentional, and meant to be a permanent reveal, as a means of garnering support for pro-registration in Civil War Frontline Issue 1. What can we say? Tony loves the limelight, and he's strategic as But the best reveal comes in the form of the cinematic adaptation of Tony Stark. In the MCU, at the end of the first Iron Man film in 2008, Tony Stark holds a press conference and decides that he's going to reveal his identity as a superhero, which is the event that is responsible for kickstarting the rest of the MCU. And that, my friends, is something that changed everything. Even in our own world, the pop culture impact that the MCU has had is undeniable.
Number 10. I'll get this out of the way. When you are a giant rock man, there's no need for a secret identity. There's nothing you can do about that. It's like when the Ninja Turtles used to wear trench coats. It is what it is, and when you are shaped like that, there isn't anything you can do. So in his case, the thing can justify not having a secret identity. That said, I can't say the same for the rest of them. Sure, Johnny's sister is Susan Storm. Susan Storm is married to Reed Richards, so those relationships are covered. But at this stage, Susan and Reed have 2 kids. And regardless of the fact that those 2 kids have impressive powers, their very existence makes them a target for more experienced, powerful enemies to use them as bargaining chips. So for the sake of their kids, I'm saying they need to start hiding. Number 9. There's a few rules about secret identities that Jay didn't quite get. But that's okay. He was one of the early ones, we'll let him slide. First is, you hide your face, lest any enemies should learn who your loved ones are. And number 2 is, don't use your powers in civilian mode unless it can't be helped. Meanwhile, Jay does not wear a mask and casually plays tennis with his super speed. Evidently Jay's loved ones matter less to him than a romp at the country club. Come on, Jay. Don't be the bougie Flash. Number 8. Namor's biggest problem is probably just the fact that he goes by his name. Sometimes he's the Submariner, but more often I see his name in full. Now, granted he's like part mermaid, part mutant and lives in the ocean, so no one's really gonna go after him in public, but his costume is literally just a Speedo. He doesn't even really need the name Submariner. It's not so much a secret identity as it is his beach outfit. I feel like if he put on a t-shirt and used some conditioner, he'd be a completely different person. Number 7. Tony Stark. Once again, way too famous, way too rich, way too noticeable. I get that in that situation it would be really difficult to maintain a secret identity since you'd literally be disappearing all the time, and then suddenly Iron Man would show up, but that's how it's always worked. And frankly, with that level of notoriety, you're going to attract people who are going to try to target you when you're defenseless. Now, granted, Tony is able to account for that with portable Iron Man suits, but what about everyone around him? Anyone accompanying him anywhere could immediately be a target. It wouldn't be hard to figure out where the other Avengers are, just follow Tony Stark around until you've found Captain America. Speaking of, number 6. Alright, so Captain America has gone back and forth on having a secret identity. And right now, he doesn't really need one now that he's generally portrayed as being time displaced, meaning most of his loved ones are dead. But originally, being publicly acknowledged as Steve Rogers would be painting a big crosshair on everyone around him, just like it would any other superhero. Not to mention his status as a war hero effectively makes him a target for terrorist groups. Not the best guy to ditch the secret identity. That said, I can kind of understand why this was totally ditched, as it was a symbolic gesture in the wake of 9/11. So yeah, I'm not taking a hard stance on him. Number 5. These guys get a slight pass because their backstories generally don't include having loved ones to worry about. That's not to say they don't have them, but when you're an ally to people like this, you kind of know what you're getting yourself into. That said, they are kind of notorious throughout the galaxy, so the smartest thing they could do would be to hide who they really are. I mean, not that it can be easy to hide a tree or a talking raccoon. That generally will give you away pretty quickly. And any mishmash of people seen with these characters will probably make the secret identity thing a bit moot, but hiding your faces might alleviate some of that. Hopefully anyway. Number 4. This is pretty much the same problem as Superman, except it's somehow worse. Probably because when you have the exact same facial hair as the well-known hero of Star City, it's a tad too obvious who you really are. This is one of those times where having a well-groomed beard is definitely to your disadvantage. Not that I'd know. Not to mention that he's an incredibly prolific playboy, so it doesn't really take much to put this one together. So I am saying he needs another secret identity. Or at least a shave. Number 3. I mean, look. There's not much you can do when your skin is green and you are 2 feet taller than everybody else. And with She-Hulk, she is actually happy to be in this form. She prefers it. That said, when Bruce Banner is still trying to keep his identity secret outside the MCU, it's pretty much a really obvious connection that you at least know him. And if anyone ever looked into when you got the blood transfusion from him that triggered your transformation, it wouldn't be hard to make associations. I know, she can't hide that she's tall and green. That's fine. You can't put on a mask and make that go away. But maybe close your law practice and don't operate under your real name? I don't know, just a thought. Number 2. This is one thing the Arrowverse got right. Black Canary, aka Dina Lance, for whatever reason, has chosen not to wear a mask at all, which is fine. But her character is fairly noticeable and generally considered very attractive, which tends to make you stand out. So anyone looking to find her would have a pretty easy time doing so. She wouldn't really blend into a crowd. So a mask or actual secret identity of any kind might give her a slight bit more safety. The Arrowverse interpretations of the character gave her both a mask and at times a wig, so it did try to disguise her a considerable amount more. So points to the Arrowverse on this one. Number 1. Jon Stewart seems completely unconcerned with anyone knowing who he is. His costume is literally just a shirt and pants. At least Jay Garrick wore a hat and moved really fast, so even if you did see him, you might not notice. Jon is just being the Green Lantern, plainly visible to anyone, and while still working as either an architect or a US Marine veteran. Put a mask on, Jon. Everyone else is doing it.
Number 10. Wolverine. Okay, so sure, we do know who Wolverine is. He is Logan. He is James Howlett. We know. But Wolverine doesn't know. Well, I mean, he does, but it took him a while to remember, okay? Okay, allow me to explain. But Wolverine may know who he is now, he didn't always, and in fact, neither did we. Wolverine has been around in the comics since the 1970s, but it wasn't until around the early 2000s that we got to know who he truly was. This was also because even Logan had forgotten due to trauma he suffered in his past. Logan's healing factor essentially gives him amnesia sometimes. This is how he is able to live through so many traumatic events. And trust me, he has lived through a ton of trauma, like a lot. Who knows how much of his past could still even be lost to us, or other identities that he lived in. He actually fathered a bunch of children and seems to have forgotten that, so. His brain seeks to mentally heal him from any horrific memories by essentially causing him to forget them. But beyond that, Wolverine has been alive since the 1800s, so I mean it's no surprise that he may have forgotten some things. He's pretty old in actuality, and therefore it makes sense that we didn't know until, like, years and years later. Number 9. Black Noir. While we may have uncovered the secret identity of the Black Noir in the comics, it took us a long time to actually get there. For a long time, no one knew who Black Noir was or where he came from, which actually made him way more terrifying. He was silent, often fully covered, and his identity remained a mystery. We eventually found out that he was the crazed clone of fellow 7 member Homelander, tasked with taking out the original version of himself should Homelander step out of line. But we have yet to know if the same identity will apply to the character in the Amazon Prime series. There have been some notable differences from the comic and the series, and the actor who plays Black Noir is not the same one that plays Homelander. Anthony Starr plays Homelander, while Black Noir is currently played by Nathan Mitchell. Only time will tell if the show will follow suit, but for now, the identity of Black Noir in the TV series still remains a mystery. Number 8. Impossible Man. Impossible Man is more imp than hero really, but he has helped out the Fantastic Four on a few occasions and attempted to save planet Earth from Galactus, so I'm going to let him claim superhero status for his attempts at heroism in this video. He often behaves like a small child, needing attention and becoming obsessed with television at one point. But unlike a small human child, he has no real identity. What? As such, his identity can never really be revealed, as it does not exist. Impossible Man hails from the planet Pop-Up, which does not use names. Impossible Man claims that on his planet, his people just simply know who they are. I guess on Pop-Up, knowing who you are is all that matters, and whether or not someone else knows who you are is a moot point. His identity will forever remain a mystery, as it doesn't really exist in the same way that our Earthling identities exist. You know, where we have names and stuff. Number 7. Bloodshot. While many may think they know Bloodshot's identity, the truth is no one really does. Bloodshot was manipulated by Project Rising Spirit into working for them as a super soldier. The process he underwent, whether he agreed to it or not is still unknown, to become a superpowered soldier involved filling his bloodstream with tiny nanites, which granted him an enhanced healing factor and allowed him to shapeshift, but also kinda wiped his memory, so the story goes. Project Rising Spirit then decided to give their soldier memories of different backstories during missions to help motivate him, meaning he never really knew who he was and thought a lot of the times that he was actually personally invested in those missions, when he sorta wasn't. And he wasn't even aware that they were manipulating him this way for quite a while. When he did eventually uncover the secret, he turned on them, aiming to retrieve his true identity. He currently believes that he is likely Ray Garrison, though even the truth he managed to uncover has later been brought into question in terms of if the information he has can even be trusted. So who knows who he is? Is he Ray Garrison? Number 6. The Question. Not Vic Savage, who we evidently do know, but the Question of the New 52. This version of the Question is part of the Trinity of Sin, and his identity has yet to be revealed. The 7 Wizards of the Rock of Eternity decide to pull up 3 of the worst sinners in Earth's history to judge. Why? I don't know, just for fun I guess. What else are wizards supposed to do to pass their time? The Question was one of the people they brought forth, but he was not intimidated and claimed that regardless of the punishment, if they let him live, he would just rise to power again, cause some mayhem, and make the wizards regret punishing him to begin with. The wizards were obviously none too pleased, so they erased his name from his mind and wiped it from history, and wiped his features off of his face as well. Note to self, do not get on the bad side of the 7 wizards. Dolphin. Dolphin is a DC superhero you may know through her connections to Aquaman and Aqualad, who she has both teamed up with and been a romantic interest of. For both heroes, actually. As a young girl, she fell off of a cruise ship and was saved from drowning by a mysterious alien race. The aliens used her as a test subject and altered Dolphin so that she could survive underwater. She spent most of her adolescent life underwater away from Atlantean culture or humanity, and it was revealed that she was mute when rescued from a shark attack by an oceanography crew. She eventually learned sign language and later learned how to speak, though she never really seemed to be able to recall her original identity or her parents, only ever being known in the comics as Dolphin. She doesn't even really like to talk that much. She's pretty shy. Number 4. Phantom Stranger. The Phantom Stranger is an entity whose original identity has never been revealed. Pre-New 52 reboot, anyways. Even the character's backstory seemed to be a wash in his original incarnation, as we all had theories in regards to how the Phantom Stranger came into their power. Most of the stories suggested that the Phantom Stranger's powers derived from a religious heritage, and that often the time he has spent on Earth was part of some kind of penitence or punishment. One story suggested that the Phantom Stranger's origins could actually be based more in the cosmos, and that he was the remains of a previous universe who had passed on his powers to one of the scientists who ended up viewing the end of the universe which he originated from. With the new relaunch, we'll likely never know the original Phantom Stranger's identity. Now he's just Judas. Number 3. Hooded Justice. Coming to us from the original Minutemen out of Watchmen, Hooded Justice was known for being the first masked vigilante. He maintained a secret identity even with his fellow Minutemen. No one truly knew who the Hooded Justice was. A brutal vigilante, all that we know is that he was likely German. Hooded Justice was a violent vigilante who was also secretly gay. So many secrets! He ended up having a relationship with fellow hero Captain Metropolis, but even then, did not disclose his identity, not even to Nelson. Originally, it was thought that Hooded Justice disappeared to avoid the government's mandatory unmasking policy for all known vigilantes. This, however, turned out to be untrue. In reality, it was comedians' plot to frame Hooded Justice for child murders, which led to his death at the hands of the original Night Owl. Number 2. The female of the species. The female of the species is part of the vigilante group looking to take down the Seven, the boys. This Dynamite comic book character's true identity has not really been fully explored in the comics or in the television series. What we do know is that the female has superhuman strength and a compulsion to kill. While she's a good person, she will even harm her friends if made to feel uncomfortable. She was originally thought to be mute, but has on occasion spoken. They thought she had no tongue, but then she spoke. I don't know. She received her powers as a small child after she was brought into her mother's work and left unattended, where she crawled into a bucket and was thereby exposed to Compound V. The small child killed many people at the facility before she was apprehended and spent a good amount of her life in captivity, heavily sedated. Number 1. Judge Dredd. Okay, so here's the thing with Judge Dredd. We do know his identity, Joseph Dredd, and yet his identity also eludes us in terms of his facelessness. He has never been unmasked. Or I mean, that's not really true. What I should say is that even when he has been unmasked, the audience was not privy to seeing his true face. Even when he's been unmasked, his face has been censored. Why? Because John Wagner, co-creator of Dredd, preferred it that way. Wagner wanted Dredd to represent justice, and the fact that you never see his face is supposed to symbolize how impartial Dredd is, the facelessness of justice. To Wagner, justice should have no face, no soul. And this has actually become a rule in Judge Dredd comics, one that was sadly broken in the 90s film Judge Dredd. JK, apparently Sylvester Stallone was Dredd the whole time. Number 10. Power Rangers. When these teens with attitude first get their powers, they are given 3 rules to follow. Count them, 3. First, they must never use their powers for personal gain. Second, they must never escalate a fight unless forced to. Can only fight with equal force, defensive styles, which is also often what the law says in North America when it comes to fighting someone. Can only use equal force. And finally, they must keep their identities secret. No one can know that they are the Power Rangers. Zordon asks the same of Tommy when he joins as the Green Ranger, though from that point on the rules would get a little loose, a little lost really. The original Rangers though had to promise to uphold all of these rules and to protect their secret identities or risk losing their powers. Despite the fact that the villains often magically seem to know their secret identities, the Power Rangers still managed to keep their civilian identities unknown when it came to the general public. And I guess villains just never really saw the point of outing the teen's secret? Number 9. Luke Cage / Carl Lucas. I know what you're about to say, but everyone knows who Luke Cage is. And yes, of course, you're right, everyone does. But not many people know who Carl Lucas is. Carl Lucas was the original identity of Luke Cage, who later adopted the mantle after his transformation into a superhero allowed him to break out of prison. Luke Cage was originally a superhero persona that ended up kinda just becoming a full-on identity for Carl, who even changed his name to Luke Cage. He was briefly Power Man, but ultimately decided to just go back to being Luke Cage, making that name both his superhero name and his actual name. Similar to his wife actually, Jessica Jones. She's kinda got a similar thing going on there. So there really is nothing to reveal with Luke because his given name has just been long forgotten and his civilian identity is his superhero identity, so can't reveal something that just exists. Number 8. Green Arrow / Oliver Queen. Alright fellow Arrowverse friends, I'm going to need you to take a seat for this one, because when it comes to Green Arrow's secret identity staying secret, the one place that it is not safe to visit is the Arrowverse. In the show Arrow, Oliver pretty much just reveals that he's Green Arrow at any chance that he can get. But in the comic book world, he's much more successful at keeping the truth under wraps. Somehow. Despite the fact that Queen Enterprises seems to have helped fund the Justice League when it started, and his later marriage to the publicly known hero Black Canary, and the fact that at one point he co-owned a flower shop called Sherwood Florist. That's not a dead giveaway, right? Still, the public seemed to be astoundingly unaware of the man behind who Green Arrow could be. Could it be Oliver Queen? Nah. Number 7. Green Lantern / Hal Jordan. Okay, so the weird thing about Hal Jordan's superhero identity, Green Lantern, is that apparently a mask is basically all that stands between him and his secret civilian identity being known by the public. And I know you might be thinking, come on Amanda, that can't be all it is. There has to be something else protecting him from being recognized, maybe like something that he's creating with his ring, like some sort of force field. Nope, apparently for Green Lantern, that's their disguise. Yeah. Case in point, Jon Stewart, fellow Green Lantern, does not seem to wear his mask, which apparently causes everyone to know who he is out of costume. He purposefully refused to wear the mask during his training, showing his pride and declaring that he had nothing to hide. As such, everyone knows who Jon is, but only those who are close to Hal, like his fellow Justice League members and his best friend Oliver Queen, truly know who he is. Number 6. The Sentry / Robert Reynolds. Other heroes may know Bob Reynolds, but the public certainly does not. And for a time actually not even the supers knew. I mean, not even Bob knew. He chose to have his mind and everyone else's on the planet Earth's wiped when it came to the existence of the hero altogether, which is what made it possible for Marvel to have him as a hero, who was active even before the Fantastic Four, apparently. He was the original B44. Bob, with the help of Doctor Strange and Reed Richards, sought to make the world forget him because they all discovered that Robert was more than just the Sentry. He also had a second personality, the supervillain, the Void. And just like the Sentry was the embodiment of pure good, the Void was kind of the embodiment of, you know, pure evil, so not so good. One could not exist without the other, so he became banished and forgotten for years and years and years. Even since his return, only colleagues and his wife really know the truth about his secret identity. Number 5. Wonder Woman / Diana Prince. Wonder Woman originally bought her identity off an American nurse, which allowed the real Diana Prince to go off and get married, becoming Diana White. That's right, Diana did not actually make up this alias. It was borrowed from a woman. A real woman who was named Diana Prince. And I say borrowed because later this woman actually came back and asked for her identity to be returned to her, which Diana kind of shrugged and just granted her wish. So Princess Diana of the Amazonians, aka Wonder Woman, became Diana Prince. A name which you really think would be a dead giveaway, especially considering Wonder Woman's costume doesn't actually do much to hide her face or her appearance, but nope. While some members of the public may know her secret identity, and her colleagues all definitely know, Diana was even checked into a mental institution where Steve forgot to mention that she was Wonder Woman, and when she claimed to indeed be the aforementioned superhero, the staff just laughed at her and claimed that she was delusional. They were like, no, you're just Diana Prince. So yeah, apparently it doesn't seem to have been made public, despite how obvious it really all should be to anyone who meets Diana Prince. Especially because Diana will probably at some point try to tell you that she actually is Wonder Woman, so. Number 4. The Flash / Barry Allen. Despite so many mysterious, convenient disappearances to go and get help, and having the Flash show up in his stead, the public do not seem to suspect that Barry Allen is actually the Flash. Even when Barry appears to simply just vanish because he hurries off so fast. He's like, where'd he go? This is some Gotham City level of ignorance, let me tell you. Still, no villain has also ever been fast enough to unmask the Flash, leaving the public to be unaware of just who the mysterious speedster is. Barry is entrusted a secret to a few people though, and in his TV show, maybe more than a few. Though not as many as Oliver Queen, so he's still taking it there in the Arrowverse. Oliver Queen every episode has to tell someone else that he's actually Green Arrow. Barry Allen trusts only family and some close friends and colleagues with his secret. Number 3. Booster Gold / Michael Carter. Booster Gold is a superhero straight out of the 25th century. He found himself inspired to become a hero after learning more about the 20th century superheroes during his time working as a security guard at the Metropolis Space Museum. Stealing futuristic equipment from the museum as well as its security bot, Skeets, Michael Carter used a time machine to travel back in time where he used the equipment he stole to become super and save the president. What a great first introduction. Just gonna save the president, no big deal. Being from the future, even if he had shared his identity with the public, it would be hard for them to comprehend who he is, as he hasn't come to exist in our time yet. This also makes it hard for villains to figure out who he is as well, as they wouldn't really be able to track down his identity easily since he came from the future. As such, only close friends of Booster know who he really is, like his robot Skeets and his good friend Blue Beetle, aka Ted Cord, who has built Booster a replacement suit on definitely more than one occasion, as well as a cybernetic arm. Number 2. Miss Marvel / Kamala Khan. After finding herself exposed to Terrigen mists, Kamala Khan underwent a transformation and was granted powers through her inhuman lineage. She now had the ability to shapeshift, allowing her to change size, shape, and alter the look of her appearance. Along with this, she also had discovered that she had a healing factor which activated whenever she returned to her original appearance. She adopted the mantle Miss Marvel and vowed to protect her home of Jersey City after her favorite hero, Carol Danvers, now Captain Marvel, had abandoned the name. While a few people know of her identity, it has never been revealed to the public, as Kamala prefers to fight smaller battles and doesn't really usually garner the attention of the scale of villains that usually become obsessed with unmasking their opponents. Only a handful of friends and family know of her identity, including her mother, who actually was not surprised to find out, Captain Marvel, and her fellow champions teammates, Nova and Miles Morales' Spider-Man. Number 1. V. The original V, both in the film adaptation and the graphic novel V for Vendetta, has an identity that remains a mystery to all. In the film, for V, their identity is even a mystery to them at one point. What we do know about V is that he was once an inmate at Larkhill Resettlement Camp, a concentration camp for all who are considered undesirable by the reigning government, Norsefire, including homosexuals, people of color, British leftists, and anyone else they basically decide they just want to lock up there. V was the sole survivor of a group who were used in horrifying medical experiments. In the film, this transformation granted him an almost superhuman physique. After escaping the camp, he donned a Guy Fawkes mask and swore vengeance on those behind the camp and the members of the fascist government regime, Norsefire. V was an anti-hero of sorts, believing in the power of anarchy, and sought to kill those in power in order to free the people, believing that all forms of government would eventually lead to fascism, while anarchy was the true path to utopia.
And at 10 is Oliver Queen. Starting off our list is a fan favorite when it comes to disappointing secret identities. This is mainly because of Ollie's lack of mask over the years, and his profusely obvious goatee. Even though in recent incarnations of the character he's ditched the facial hair, thank god, some think that it would be very hard for civilians not to connect the dots, and discover that they're two and the same. I don't know, what do you guys think? Up next at 9 is Green Lantern. Take a look at Kyle Rayner or Hal Jordan. They've got that little tiny eye mask on their faces, which, let's be real, doesn't go real far when it comes to keeping identity secret. And yes, this could probably apply to a lot of other heroes, but dude can basically create anything that he wants, and he doesn't wear a cowl or a helmet or a hood or anything, which makes it easy to spot out who he really is. Up next at 8 is Jay Garrick. Jay Garrick is the Golden Age Flash, and personally, I've always really loved his costume. His helmet was his father's helmet from World War I, and his lightning bolt shirt was his football jersey from his college days. All in all, it's pretty cool. Except, you know, everyone can see his face. Initially in the comics, it was common knowledge that Garrick was the Flash, but later it was retconned and stated that because he's constantly vibrating, no one can make out his features, and he doesn't really photograph because of this. At 7, we have Dick Grayson. So back when Dick first appeared on the scene, his acrobatic act with his family required him to wear a costume that looked like this. Oh hey, you know what would make a great costume? Something that looks almost exactly like the Flying Graysons uniforms, right? Yeah, totally. So we have this. And at 6 is Matt Murdock. So here's a case of connect the dots. While the Daredevil costume is pretty good at concealing Matt's identity, certain versions of the costume, especially his ninja one, make it pretty obvious he isn't using his eyes. And Matt Murdock is obviously blind when you encounter him as a civilian. So if you had a hunch, putting 2 and 2 together isn't too far of a stretch here. A for effort though, Matt. A for effort. And at number 5 is Wonder Woman. Oh, Diana Prince. Yes, you're a badass Amazon warrior, but how do you hide your identity? Oh, I don't know, maybe some glasses. This is unfortunately a reoccurring thing that we'll be touching on over the next few numbers. But to be fair, I'm more lenient of Diana here since she's got a bunch of tricks up her sleeve, like that lasso and those bracelets and the fact that she built an invisible jet when she was young. So I imagine she's a bit more stealthy than some of the other ones on this list. But there was that time when she was a spy and was far more concerned with being fashionable than I guess dressing practically and being stealthy, so I don't know, the 70s was a weird time, guys. And at 4 is Supergirl. Okay, so straight up, the entire Superman family is really bad at this whole secret identity thing. But for starters, let's take a look at Supergirl. While there's a whole lot of feels I have about this that I'm gonna save and sum up in our next number, let's focus specifically on the TV version of Supergirl. Kara manages to do a bit better than her Kryptonian family members by not only wearing glasses, but switching up her hairstyles. Yes, hair can help deceive friends. Or I guess rather ponytail? No ponytail. It's like she's a whole other person. And at 3 is Clark Kent. Oh hey, let's just throw on a pair of glasses and no one will ever know who I am. That's such a genius idea, Clark. I'm just gonna leave it at that. And our number 2 spot is He-Man. In the same vein as our buddy Clark Kent, here we have an even spectacularly worse job at hiding a superhero identity. If Prince Adam's civilian wear doesn't stand out enough, it probably doesn't help that when he's He-Man, he's just a stripped down version of his regular flamboyant self. And come on, those pecs are kind of a dead giveaway, regardless of what he's wearing. Although when he is He-Man, he does get a bit of a tan. Do tans count as a disguise? I just don't know anymore, guys. I just don't know. And finally, at number 1 is The Thing. Dude, just because you put on a trench coat does not mean your identity becomes a secret. You're still clearly The Thing. You're really hard to miss. You stick out. I'm sorry. I mean, even if you're incapable of figuring this out, your teammates are all scientists, so couldn't you just, I don't know, ask one of them to make like a sciencey thing, like a hologram or a mask or something that could help you out in this department? Trench coats are not a good look. That's what flashers wear. It's like immediately suspicious.